Within less than a 2-year period, I got arrested 6 times, and I just honestly was a deadbeat. Like, I ruined my life. And I realized that I just don't want to be this person anymore.
You are an entrepreneur, CEO of acquisition.com, co-founder of Gym Launch, which sold for $50 million.
Most things in life actually require much less effort than we think.
How do you recommend people change their own lives?
They have to change their relationship with their thoughts and feelings. Honestly, fitness and diet is actually worse than anything I've ever seen. How defensive somebody is over their diet, I correlate with their intelligence.
But what if they're right?
I think you've said this before, that your goal was $1 billion. Is that true?
Yes.
Why do you say yes as though there's a little stipulation?
I think $1 billion's way too small.
Leila Hormozi, you are an entrepreneur, CEO of acquisition.com, co-founder of Gym Launch, which sold for $50 million, co-founder of Prestige Labs, and Alan, thank you so much for coming on the Iced Coffee Hour.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to see what we talk about today.
So one of my favorite things about your story is how inspirational it is, because you were not always the person that you are today. You have gone on the record and said that you were arrested one time 6 times in 1 year. What were those arrests for, and how did that compel you to change to become the person you are today?
When I got arrested, it was between the age of, I was like almost 18, and between that and like almost 20. So it was like within less than a 2-year period. I got arrested 6 times. And what kind of led up to that, I think it's kind of misleading, because the few years leading up to that, I actually was like a pretty decent kid. Like, I got decent grades. I went to school. I was not like a f off in any way. But it was, I think, what happened prior to that, and like what had built up over time that then was unleashed when I left the house. You know, prior to being a teenager, I would say at the age of, I think I was 14, and I had been living with my mother, who was an alcoholic and drug addict. And up to that point, I had kept it a secret. And so I hadn't told my dad, because my parents got divorced, and she started getting into all of that when they got divorced. And I'd been very close to her when I was little. And so I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want to have to go live with my dad, because I hadn't even known my dad that well. And I was just always a like very introverted kid. And so I kept it to myself, and I kind of just took care of her and took care of myself. You know, she didn't have a job. She had different boyfriends. Like, it was just kind of a mess. And so at the age of 14, it got to a point where it couldn't really be kept a secret anymore, because, you know, I came home one day, she was threatening to kill herself. She took a bunch of pills, and so I had to call 911. And when I called 911, they called my dad. My dad showed up, and he's like, "What have you been hiding? Has this been going on?" And I was like, I mean, yeah, I just haven't wanted to tell anybody, because I just didn't want to hurt my mother, right? Because in some way I thought that that would do that. And so I ended up leaving that house and then going to live with my dad, who also had, at that point, now was living and remarried, and I had 3 step siblings that were in the house. And so finally, when I got out of the house, it was like, thank God, freedom. You know what I mean? Like, I already know how to take care of myself. Like, I don't need this. But it was also a lot of anger, because I don't think that I had a lot of coping mechanisms that I have now. And so what I defaulted to was, you know, unfortunately the same thing that my mother had, which was just alcohol, right? I'm at college, I moved out, I'm in the dorms, everyone's drinking. And so any night and every night that there was available, which was pretty much, you know, 5 nights a week when you're in college, I decided to go out and party. And I made friends with people who were dealers. And then the rest of my friends were drinking every night. And so I just, at first it started as something that was fun. And then it turned into really just trying to mask a lot of this anger and anxiety that I felt. And I think I'd had most of my life, but I had been able to stuff it down for a long enough time. And I think when I got that out of the house, it just felt like a lot was unleashed, including that. And so I just went on like essentially a bender for 2 years. Like, I just was drinking all the time. I gained a bunch of weight. I already wasn't like the most in shape, but like then gaining on top of that, I was almost 100 pounds heavier than I am now. And I just honestly was a deadbeat. Like, I ruined my life, and for that period of time. And it wasn't until my 6th arrest when I was just completely humiliated, because I had gone out the night before, and then I woke up and I was just in my parents' house, and I was like, because like I hadn't woken up any other time in my parents' house. I'd been at, you know, my own house. I had a ticket in my purse or whatever. I went to the jail for a second, and then I got out. And so I woke up, I didn't remember what had happened, and I just saw a ticket next to the bed, and I'm at my parents' house. And I was like, oh my God. And then I just remember being filled with dread. And I walked downstairs because there's nowhere else to go in the house, and it's a very small house. And I remember my dad was sitting there with my stepmom, and I was ready for him to just rail into me and just be like, what are you doing with your life? What's wrong with you? All these things. Like stuff I already freaking knew. And instead of doing any of that, I sat down and he looked at me, and I remember his eyes were like welled up with tears, and he was just like, I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to tell you what to do. It's like, I just want to say that I think if you keep going down this route, I just think you're going to. And he said it in this way that was so matter of fact that it's like, I think when you're young, you think you're invincible and you think that nothing can hurt you. You know, I would drive drunk. I would, do all sorts of drugs and mix with alcohol. Like there was a lot of stuff I did that was very reckless. And I think it all stemmed from thinking I was invincible. And in that moment, the way he looked at me, it was like all of a sudden I realized I wasn't. And I realized that all of this looked very similar to somebody who I didn't want to be, which was my mother. And I just remember feeling a deep sense of shame. And so I didn't say much because I was like, it doesn't really matter. I've said things before. And I went upstairs, and I remember I took a shower and I got out and I was like, I just don't want to be this person anymore. Like it's been long enough. It's been 2 years. I'm going down a route that I watched my mother go down that ruined her whole life. And I thought it was really fun and games at first, but it turned into something that was no longer fun. And I was like, I don't want to do this. And I think I was so fed up with myself. Like looking at myself in the mirror, I was disgusted with how much I weighed. I was disgusted with the fact that I knew I was smart and I wasn't doing anything about it. I knew I was hardworking and I wasn't working hard. I was just off. And honestly, it's really weird because a lot of people are like, what did you do to change? And I was like, I just hated myself so much that in that moment, it was like the pain of remaining who I was much greater than the pain of changing and the pain of what it could possibly be like to change. That at that point, there was no choice. It was like, you have to change yourself. And that was the moment that I decided that I needed to make my life worth living. And that was a promise I had made to myself when I was very little, when I was dealing and living in the house with my mom, is I said, I have to make it worth it. And I was like, you're not keeping that promise to yourself right now. And you don't look anything like the person that you said you were going to be. And so either feel bad for yourself like you have been and keep kicking the can down the road. And what does your life look like in 5 years? Probably really like, what if you gain another 100 pounds? What does that look like? Like, when does it end? When is enough enough? 7 arrests, 8 arrests, 10 arrests, you go to prison? Like, what does it look like? And so I just said, like, now is my enough. I'm done.
What was the first arrest for?
Oh, minor in possession.
Got it.
Yeah.
And what was it like being arrested? Were you scared at the time? Because I imagine your first time has got to be terrifying.
How old were you when you were first arrested?
I think it was 17.
17.
Yeah.
And what is it like? Like the cop comes up to you, you have this dread in your body, you feel weak, and he's like, okay, and he cuffs you or something like that. What was that experience like?
I felt ashamed because actually they were trying to make an example of me. And so they normally, when it's a minor possession, they don't even like do much, but because they were trying to make an example because of whatever, there was like it was a whole thing. They cuffed me in front of everybody and then walked me all the way across the parking lot into the car, took me into the station, did the whole spiel, like taking your fingerprints, pictures, all that kind of stuff. And then called my parents, and because I was 17 at the time. And so honestly, it's just complete shame and humiliation is what it is, because you think you're doing something cool and you think you're fitting in with people, and then all of a sudden someone snaps you out of it and then just makes you look like a complete bad word.
Yeah. What made you different, though? Because I feel like a lot of people go down that path and they can never get out. They can never escape that.
The odds are not in your favor, for sure. Like if you are going down that path, you've been arrested a few times, you're drinking a lot, you're not in the gym, you're leading, I would say a non-productive life. People just usually spiral.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was necessarily what your dad said to you in the way that he said it that actually snapped you out of it. It was something that you did because you decided to make that change at the end of the day.
I think at the end of the day, when I look at people who change and people who don't, it's what do you fear more? And I think a lot of people are so afraid of their feelings, of the fear of what if, of the fear of the unknown, of the fear of not drinking and not doing this and losing all these things. but they're not able to weigh the pain that they currently have. And so I think for me, something that I've always prided myself on is not being afraid of pain, like emotional pain. Because I remember anchoring myself in that moment. I was like, nothing can be worse than what I dealt with in that house. And so if I got through that when I was a kid with less coping mechanisms, less skills, less resources than I have now, there's no way that I can't get myself out of this. I am more capable. I'm smarter. I know more. I have more capabilities. I'm not a helpless child. And so that is what I've always had to anchor to, because I don't think I've had anything in my life be harder than that was. Not because it wasn't harder, but because of relative skill at the time when I was a child that had to learn how to take care of herself and her mother who would disappear for weeks on end. Like that, there's a big skill gap there. And so it's just like terrifying. And so I remember in those moments, I anchored to that. It was like, that was probably the most painful thing I could have gone through. This can't be as bad as that.
Although, you know what? Before we go into that, we got to do some quick math, because the less money your business spends, the more money you get to keep. But with higher expenses on materials, labor, distribution, and borrowing, everything is costing more. So to reduce these costs and headaches, smart businesses are upgrading to our sponsor, NetSuite by Oracle.
NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one platform and one source of truth. With NetSuite, you drastically reduce IT costs because it lives in the cloud with no hardware required, and you can access it from anywhere.
Basically, you could cut the cost of maintaining multiple systems because you have one unified business management suite. You could also improve efficiency by bringing all of your major business processes into one platform, thereby slashing manual tasks and errors. Over 37,000 companies have already made the move, so do the math and see how much you'll profit with NetSuite.
And by popular demand, NetSuite has decided to extend its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for just a few more weeks. And to access it, all you got to do is head over to netsuite.com/iced.
Again, that's netsuite.com/iced, netsuite.com/iced, down below in the description. Thank you so much. And now let's get back to the podcast.
So if you think fear is like the pinnacle of all motivators, do you think people can reprogram their fears, or do you think that they're unable to do that?
I think a lot of people, what they do is they spend their life avoiding fear. They're running the opposite direction. And then the first time that you're able to just grit your teeth and bear through it and jump into it, right? Then what happens is you then create a positive association with facing fear. But a lot of people aren't willing to just take that first step. Now, I think that I was forced to in many ways in the beginning of my life. And so I was forced to confront fear of like being home alone, taking care of myself, like not knowing what to do with the dogs and the cats. And like, how do I do this? How do I get clothes for myself? Like all these things that were unknowns, and they felt scary when you're a kid. But I was forced to do it because in my mind, there was no other alternative. I cannot tell anybody about my mother because I love her too much, and I will not expose her to the world for what she is and what she's been doing. And so I think that a lot of people, when they don't have a situation that puts their back against the wall where they're forced to face the fear, they have to learn to manufacture it. Because, for example, if I go, there's lots of people watching this who have something they're scared of, and they're like, I just can't get over it. I'm like, do you think the mom that has 2 children to feed can't get over her fear of whatever it is to feed them? But she has responsibility. And I think a lot of people are unwilling to take on responsibility, but what responsibility does is it gives you a reason to face the fear. And I think a lot of us, we need a reason bigger than ourselves to face that fear. And for me, what I was able to anchor to after that first time of basically being forced in my mind was, I want to be that example for everybody else who doesn't have this. Like, I haven't had an example, right? I didn't have a great mother example growing up. I didn't have all these things. And so for me, when I was a kid, there was a night where my mom hadn't come home, and I would always call her because I was like, I just want her to answer so I know she's not dead. Like, that was all it was. And I'd called her probably 15 times, and I was sitting there in my guest bedroom staring out the window. It was like 3 a.m. And I remember very vividly, I was using one of those phones. It's like a cord phone with like little twisty, it was so ugly. And she didn't pick up, and I left a message. I was like, I just want you to let me know, like, are you okay? Like, do I need to call the cops? And before I could finish the message, I remember hanging up. And I hung up because this like voice in my head was like, it's not going to work. Like, just stop calling her. Like, it's not going to change. And when I had that moment, I remember looking out the window, and the first thought that popped in my head was like, you need to be the woman that you do not have. You need to make it worth it. And that was the phrase that stuck with me, which was like, make this worth it. Make this pain that you have today worth something in the future. And so when I deterred myself from that path and I was arrested and I was gained all that weight and I was going through that period of time, I anchored back and I remembered that. And I was like, I need to be that person, because what else, like what other reason do I have to live? Like truly though, like a lot of people, everyone has their own reason for why they are on earth. I think that I've created my own reason, but in my mind, my reason has always been to make that pain worth something. Like you have to make the rest of your life better to justify the amount of pain that you went through at that age.
How's the relationship with your mom today?
I don't speak to her.
How did that happen? Did you just decide at one point to cut her off?
No, I tried to have a relationship for a very long time. I loved my mother very much, and she was very intelligent. She was beautiful. She was very sweet to me when I was a kid, but the alcohol and the drugs truly just changed her as a person. I think probably damaged her brain from a lot of what happened. And for a long time, I would say from the age of probably 16 to 26, I tried to have a relationship. I set boundaries. I said, I will see you on these holidays. We will talk every 2 weeks. We'll do all these things. And I would show up for the holiday and she'd be drunk off her ass and pin me in a room and try smacking me in the face. I would, show up for Christmas and she's passed out drunk. And so it's just like time after time, I was like, I can take it. And like, I could deal with the pain of watching her like this. Like I've gotten used to it at this point, right? And at this point, I'm a teenager. I'm like developing. I'm not getting upset by watching these things happen. But it was actually when she started blaming me for her life that I realized it was really distracting me from living my own. The last time I spoke to her, I was running Gym Launch, and I said I would give it a shot. Basically, the last time I'd seen her, it was a holiday, and this whole thing had happened, drunk, whatever, all this stuff is drama. I was just like, every time I see you, it's a negative experience. Like, why must it be this way? Like, do you realize what you do? Like, why do you do this? And she's like, and it would be like, it would be good, and then like something awful, right? And so I said, let's try talking every couple weeks, and then I will, talk to you once every 2 weeks, essentially. And in between the 2 weeks, there was time where she called me, and I was on this charity trip actually, and I was busy like legitimately 6 a.m. until 9 p.m. with all these charity things we were doing. We were associated with a very large charity years ago. And I texted her and I was like, I can't talk. And also it hasn't been 2 weeks. It's been like a few days, and I'm not in a place where I can talk right now and have a conversation. And I'll be honest, the conversations weren't very pleasant because she didn't really ask me any questions. She just wanted to talk about her own life, which I thought was very odd. And so what ended up happening was she didn't respond to my text. And then I got back from the trip and I got a text from my stepdad, who I'm not close with. And it was like, your mom's in the psych ward. And I was like, I'm like running a meeting and I'm like, Jesus Christ. And so after I finished, I called him and I was like, okay, so what happened? Because my mother has gone to the hospital multiple times. She's gone to rehab multiple times. She's gone everywhere. And he was like, well, your mom, she like lost it and he was saying and trying to. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. You've failed every time. And so, I mean, seriously, like, it's like, if you really wanted to, you would do it. And so I don't consider this to be like, you want to die. I consider it, you want attention.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay. And he was like, it would have been nice if you just picked up the phone when she called. And I was like, what does that have to do with this? And I remember he was like, I think you know what it has to do with this. And I was like, no, I don't. I was like, wait. Are you blaming me? And he was like, yeah. He's like, you're the reason your mother's like this. And in that moment, I was just so blown away. I remember the thing I said to him. I said, honestly, I feel like I'm talking to someone with the IQ of a kindergartner. So I'm going to hang up now and I will communicate with my mother. And so I hung up and I wrote my mother an email. And I said, I want to understand if you agree with this. Do you believe that you are the way you are because I do not want to associate with you and because I moved out of the house and did all these things? And I remember her response, which was she wouldn't say no. I was like, she called me. She's like, I got your email. And I was like, so what's the answer? And she was like, well, She's like, it's horrible that you won't talk to me. It's horrible that you've distanced yourself. Do you know what it's like to lose a child? And I was like, do you know what it's like to lose a mother? Like, I didn't say anything. I'm just listening. And then by the end, she basically said, yes, I agree with what he said. And I do think a lot of it's your fault. And I still, like, my heart rate goes up because I remember what I said to her. I said, I just want you to know that if you kill yourself and succeed, I will not feel bad, and I will not think it's my fault, because it is not. I'm an adult. You are an adult. Your life is not my responsibility. This entire situation, you took me when I was 9 years old and made me take care of you, a 47-year-old woman. I was like, what you did made no sense. And so I want you to know I accept zero responsibility over your life or your life you choose to end. I do not want to talk anymore. I wish you the best. I like want the best for you as a person, but I can't do it. And honestly, saying that was the most freeing thing I think I've ever said in my life, because it's like this thing that was hanging over me of like, her life is in my hands. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I was a kid, it was like, if I don't come home on time, or if this, it was very weird opposite, right? A lot of alcoholics do this, where essentially they make the person who's taking care of them feel bad and feel like things are their fault. She would blame me. You're why I'm miserable. You're why I drink. You know, just always drunk, saying things about like how I am the source of her misery. And then I realized that sense of victimhood never went away. It only stayed there. She didn't learn. She didn't learn anything from all the years, all the rehab, all the therapy. You still think it's me and my fault, yet you want me to be in your life. And I was like, I can't think of anything worse that an enemy would do to me, let alone a family member. And I remember I hung up the phone and I told Alex, I just said, my life is worse with her in it. And as much as I deeply would love to have a mother, and I would deeply love for her to resolve everything, I cannot subject myself to this. I'm tired. It's been a decade. I can't keep doing this. And if she succeeds, I accept the guilt and the sadness I will feel that day and for many days thereafter. But the pain that she is inflicting on me as I am alive, and the things that she believes that I am the source of, I can't have somebody like this in my life and do everything I want to do and be who I want to be. And that was the last time I spoke to her.
One thing that's really interesting about that is you seem to be able to talk about it in a very matter-of-fact way. This might be a little bit of a blunt question, but how healed would you say you are from that?
Very.
And how were you able to do that? A lot of people have something a little bit traumatic that happens to them early in their life. And it's actually interesting. Alex says trauma is just very fast learning.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How were you able to cross that bridge and finally be able to, heal from that?
I think a lot of it has been, one, I'm not afraid to talk about it. Like, I talk about it here. I'll talk about it to anyone who wants to listen or wants to ask me about it, because I think that we normalize keeping people in our life who make our lives worse because they are called family or because they've been our friends for years. And I firsthand am somebody who I don't want to say that I don't talk to my mother. It's embarrassing to a degree, and it makes me sound like I'm a bad daughter. But I would rather be considered a bad daughter than have somebody in my life who blames me for their entire existence or miserable part of their existence, right? Whether it be consciously or subconsciously, whatever's happening at the time. And so I think I went through a long period of time of realizing that my mother is a human just like anybody else. She happens to be the person that gave birth to me. Would I choose to have a relationship with this person if she was not my mother? The absolute answer was just no. And the other piece of it was, looking at what do I gain from, I've tried to help her for 10 years and nothing has worked. Everything I have done, the only things that have worked have been when I have left, have been when I have said, I'm going to stop enabling your behavior. And I think a lot of it was just being able to say, I won't stand to be treated this way, whether you're my mother or not. And if I look back at all the things that happened, I think that I gave her a lot of grace for even trying for the 10 years I did, because it was a really tough 10 years. And, I think the reason that we give people chances because it's not like it's all negative, right? There's the positive in there as well. But when over time the negative continues to get worse, not better, that's when I'm like, if this continues this way, it's only going to get worse. And what would happen every time is something would get better for a minute, and then I would hold on, and then it would get worse. And all of a sudden it's 80% bad and maybe a 20% glimpse of good. And it was just all consuming, honestly. It was very all consuming. And I think I've just accepted that I'm okay with how people will judge me for it. Because I think, one, a lot of it is people don't want to talk about this stuff because they're afraid of getting judged, and I'm okay with it. You know, people always say the same thing. What are you going to do when she dies? Probably feel really fucking sad. I would be lying if I said I don't sometimes question, like, do I want to try and reach out at some point? Do I want to do this? Of course my brain goes there, because it's like, there was that person I had for 9 years who was really great. But I've also made peace with the fact that the person that I knew for those 9 years that were really good, that person has died. And so the person I know now does not exhibit love in a way that I wish to receive it.
What's interesting is you seem to be able to rationalize your healing with logic. But a lot of people, even if logic goes against what they're doing, that's not enough to rationalize changing. Like, how are you able to use logic to say, I have road A, road B. Road A is what might feel good, and it might be a little bit of like an emotional journey, but road B is logical. And I think over time, I'll be better off there. A lot of the times people pick road A.
Yeah. The emotional part is so much more powerful too. I mean, that's probably 10x what logic could do.
Yeah.
Why are you able to take the logical route? Which, if most people just followed the logic, they would be better off. I mean, I would say virtually everybody, if they just followed logic, they'd be better off. But they don't.
Honestly, I think it's because of her. You know, I watched her ruin her own life because she gave into her emotions. My mother could probably have accomplished and still accomplish very similar things to what I do. She was smart. She was beautiful. She was kind. She was hilarious. Like, she was a very dynamic person. And she let some of the same things that I have, like I have a tendency to get like very stressed and anxious and have like really weird thoughts and things. She didn't, I don't think she had the skills to manage those things. And so when I watched her growing up give in to a lot of her emotions, I watched it ruin a marriage. I watched it ruin her relationship with my sister. I watched it ruin her relationship with her friends. I watched it then ruin her relationship with herself and her health. And then I watched it ruin her relationship with me, the only person who never hurt her. And all of it stemmed down to avoiding her emotions. And if anything, succumbing to fear. You know, she was everything. If you tie it back to somebody that's, an alcoholic and in drugs, and like, it's all fear-based. They're just trying to cope with the things that we all feel in life, and they don't know how. And I think a lot of it had been, especially in the beginning, like, I want to be the opposite of that. And so a lot of what I've inspired, like what I was at first motivated to do was be the complete opposite of her. What I'm now motivated to do is be the version of myself that I see in the future. So it has changed. Yeah. But I think a lot of it stemmed from seeing that didn't work. It didn't work for her. It didn't work for her family that also had their own issues. And it just doesn't. And I think I'm lucky because when I was young, my dad put me in Children of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the one concept that I learned there that I think was what gave me a lot of strength when I finally left was they talk about enabling. And that when somebody acts in an adverse way, say like they're drinking, and you don't let them feel the impact of that, which was I would throw out her booze. I would hide them. I would call my dad and say everything's okay. I would take care of the animals because she wasn't feeding them. I would let the dogs out. I would clean the house. I would do all these things, right? She'd a night out, all this stuff would break everywhere. I'd clean it all up before she woke up. And I realized when I was understanding that is that if you don't allow someone to experience the consequences, right? If they touch a hot stove and don't get burned, they'll touch it again. And a lot of what I was doing without knowing when I was a child was I was enabling her because I loved her and I didn't want her to be in pain. I saw she was in pain, clearly, a lot of emotional pain. And so I wanted her to get out of it. And so I would try to buffer all the things around. And that's how I grew up quickly because I tried to take care of her. But then I realized that was just allowing her to remain in this place. And instead I needed to let her feel the consequences for herself. And so, when I finally ended up calling the police that day when she was like, I'm myself, and then knowing what would happen thereafter, I was like, I won't go back because she needs to feel the consequences. Because if there's any like glimmer of hope that she changes, then she has to feel the consequences of this.
How do you recommend people change their own lives? If they feel unfulfilled, if they feel like they're in a situation where they're stuck or they can't get ahead, what is your advice to those people?
I think a lot of people, when they're at a point where they want to change their lives, they have to change their relationship with their thoughts and feelings. I think that's where it all stems from. Because a lot of the times, the reason that somebody can't change their life is because they have a really shitty relationship with their thoughts and feelings. I mean, I know I did when I was at the point where I wasn't changing my life, which was, thinking that all thoughts are true. That's an example of one. Also, like believing that my feelings are directives. And so we think when I'm nervous, I should not do something. If I have a thought that I could fail, I shouldn't try, right? And it's almost this weird process of unlearning some of the old sayings that people say, like trusting your gut and doing all these things. That hasn't worked for me very well. If I trusted my gut, I wouldn't be doing half the that I do right now. So I think a lot of it is understanding and educating yourself on the realities of how the brain works, how feelings works, how all those things, because that's honestly what I've done. Like I've studied more behavioral psychology than I have business, because that's how I've helped myself be in a position where I can actually even lead people confidently, because I can manage my own thoughts and feelings. And I think a lot of people can't change their lives because what's standing in the way is not some force of freaking nature or a person standing there. It's their thoughts. It's their feelings that they're afraid of. They're afraid it might come true. They're afraid that they're going to feel really, really bad and that it might never go away. It's all these irrational fears. It's never logic. And so the only way to overcome something that is not logical is to understand in my opinion, how it actually works. How do thoughts actually work? How do feelings actually work? When I educated myself on those things, I finally was like, oh my God, it's normal. These things that are happening to me, these feelings I'm experiencing, they're normal. My reaction is what the problem is, not the thoughts or the feelings themselves. My reaction to run and hide from them is actually what's causing my entire life of problems. It's the reason why I'm not achieving my dreams, not the actual thoughts or feelings themselves. It's not like successful people and unsuccessful people have different thoughts and feelings. It's that they respond to them differently. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite things that I've ever heard on a podcast, I don't know if it was you or Alex, but it was a story about you, how you guys were walking together. Someone bumped you and said, "Watch out, skinny bitch."
Yeah.
And you laughed and you're like, "Oh, you think I'm skinny?" And then people, whenever I talk to somebody about thoughts and feelings and how you only allow something to impact you based off of what you label it as, good or bad, I always bring up that example because I think it's like, it's perfect. It's perfect. On that note, I want to know, because it's unbelievable to think that you've studied behavioral psychology more than you've studied business, especially when we walk into this headquarters and we see just like how expansive your business truly is. What have you learned in behavioral psychology that's helped you mostly with running a business?
Ironic process theory, which is, it can apply to a lot of things in life. For example, if you want a thought to get bigger, run away from it. If you want a feeling to get bigger, run away from it. If you want something to get smaller, you run towards it. If you want to relax, don't try to relax. If you want, basically, most things in life actually require much less effort than we think. And so a lot of the times what you see is like people are very confused as to why am I feeling anxious? And they believe that the reason that they're feeling anxious is because they have these thoughts. It's not because they have the thoughts. It's because they then do something once they have the thought, because they teach themselves the thought is bad by saying, oh, don't think that thought, and I'm going to go do something else instead. I'm going to go drink, right? And then what they do is they train themselves to be scared of a thought. Same goes for feelings, right? Someone feels anxious, they feel stressed, they feel mad. They go out, and this is actually one that is probably much more common. It's more like socialized, but some people go and they're like, I'm going for a run, right? And then why do people get hooked on running? Because they've taught themselves that in order to avoid feeling anxious, they must run. And then you see people get hooked on exercise, and it's like normalized, like, oh yeah, I only work out 5 hours a day. But I'm a fitness trainer, right? It's like, actually you're, okay. Anyways, I've done that one. And so it's really, things require a lot less effort than you think. It's just that the effort it requires is that split second of feeling terrified at first. And so I have this phrase I tell myself very frequently, which is do the opposite. It's like I need to do the opposite of what my natural inclination is, because my natural inclination is always to survive, which means run and hide from scary things. And what do we label as scary is thoughts and feelings that we don't like. And so I always just have trained myself, do the opposite. And the reason that this has helped me so much, I think, in business is because I understand how other people's brains work. I know when I tell them something or when they have a certain thought or have a certain feeling, I can help coach them through it because I'm constantly coaching myself through it. You know what I mean? And I think there's different tactics that I use to help myself and help others to get over that stuff. But a lot of the times, I think in terms of understanding what you need to do, I think once you understand that running away from something actually makes it worse, right? And bigger, and avoiding a fear also makes it bigger. Then the next question is, well, how do you change it, right? And I think the first step that I would just give as advice to a lot of people, and what I try with people on my team, is just get space from it. A lot of times you get a thought, you get a feeling, and then you have an automatic urge to do something. It could be binge eat. It could be go on a run. It could be drink. It could be do a drug, right? Instead, just sit for 5 minutes. And guess what happens if you fucking sit for 5 minutes? That shit goes away. You're like, oh, I'm hungry. I want a snack. Oh, wait. I was thinking about something scary, But eventually it moves on. And so I think what I've learned is, one, thoughts and feelings pass whether you want them to or not, and whether you do something about it or not. A lot of people think you have to do something to get rid of a negative. No, that shit's going to go away no matter what you do. But you train yourself to think you have to do something to get rid of something. And then I think the second piece to it is just taking a small step in the direction of the negative thought or the negative emotion, because what will soon happen is it will actually turn into a positive association. So I'll give you an example, right? Which is a lot of people are scared of going to the gym, right? They get super scared of going to the gym. They're like, I'm so nervous. I haven't been to the gym. I look fat in my thing. I work out. They get all nervous and sweaty, right? This was me when I was overweight. And so what happens is you go to the gym. The first few times you're really nervous. What happens after just 5 days? After 5 days, I like going to the gym. That is how quickly we can change fear. That is how quickly. Think about how many people are terrified of speaking on stage. And they speak on stage once, and then twice, and then by the third time, they're like, I can't get enough of this, right? Mm-hmm. And so the same thing goes if you look at people with phobias of animals and spiders. They end up getting a fucking tarantula for a pet. Mm-hmm. Because all of a sudden, you feel this sense of euphoria that you realize this thing that you've been terrified of is nothing at all. And then suddenly you're like, I actually want more of it.
But before we go into that, this section is sponsored by Range Rover Sport, because as I'm sure you guys are aware, I'm an absolute fanatic when it comes to cars. I even have one on display in my office. And if you're looking for a sporting luxury car that's powerful on the road, dynamic by design, and truly embodies the essence of automotive excellence, then let me introduce you to something special, the Range Rover Sport.
The third generation Range Rover Sport is the most desirable, advanced, and dynamically capable yet. It leads by example with powerful on-road performance and commanding all-terrain capability. With its striking design and unmistakable presence, it is the epitome of both luxury and performance combined.
Inside, you'll notice advanced technologies like active noise cancellation, cabin air purification, and the award-winning Pivi Pro infotainment system that provides complete intuitive control over the entire vehicle.
Oh, and by the way, Graham, talk about those massage seats.
Oh yeah, you're also going to be driving in complete comfort with the optional 22-way adjustable heated and ventilated electric memory front seats with massage function.
It is just absolutely insane.
And you could start designing your Range Rover Sport today at LandRoverUSA.com. Again, that's LandRoverUSA.com, or the link is also down below in the description. So thank you again to Range Rover Sport for sponsoring this video, which is absolutely mind-blowing to say, because as a kid, I always admired their vehicles, and to be able to be in this position today is incredible. So thank you so much. Go and spec out your Range Rover Sport today, even just for fun. See if you like it. Thank you so much, and now let's get back to the episode.
This thing that you've been terrified of is nothing at all. And then suddenly you're like, I actually want more of it.
And what do you see to the people who overthink things, who get in that negative thought spiral of they have something they're worried about and they start thinking about it and ruminating on it and trying to work through it, and it just consumes them?
The number one thing for people who are overthinkers is that more thinking isn't going to solve the problem. I'm the queen of overthinking. When Alex met me, bless his soul, I'm very good at what I do because I care a lot, but I also overthink the crap out of everything, or at least I did. I actually don't think I do so much anymore. And so what I realized is that there's one thing, which is I can distract myself from the overthinking in the short term. In the short term, I will distract myself by forcing myself to do something else. So for example, whenever I would have a really scary thought come up about something, but it was irrational. It's like, maybe it's, when I first started doing speaking and I was going to speak on stage, I would get terrified. I have these like wash over me of anxiety. My heart rate would go up, all these things. And instead I was like, okay, I'm going to tackle this big project right now because I have this fear that keeps popping up. And I'm going to make myself focus on that instead. That's an example of something that I would do to make sure I'm not overthinking, because the thinking is leading nowhere, right? It's just me worrying now and later rather than just later, when I would rather save myself from doing it now, right? And I think the second thing with overthinking is a lot of people have this bias for thinking rather than a bias for action. And so when you're overthinking something, the best thing that you can do, again, is take a small step in direction of uncertainty. Because a lot of times the reason we overthink things is we think that we have to be certain in order to do something. And so we keep overthinking, thinking, I'm going to solve it, and I'm going to get a sense of certainty before I move forward. But the reality is certainty doesn't even exist. It's just almost like a concept we make up in our brains. Like, there's no certainty. We don't even know if we're going to be here tomorrow. I could get hit by a car. And so when I realized that a lot of overthinking is actually seeking certainty, and there is no certainty, then I was like, well, then I should just try it out. Like, test the theory. And so we have like a saying in the company, which is like, let's test it. And I do that with a lot of things in life, where I'm like, fuck it, I'll just try it, right? If it's terrible and awful, I will feel pain in the moment, and then I will just not do it again, right? And that's a way that I'm able to kind of trick myself into doing something rather than continue to think about something, because I think a lot of people waste their lives overthinking rather than getting into action.
Now, you mentioned before 6 life cheat codes to get ahead. Do you remember what those are?
Yeah. This is a compilation of a few different behavioral science books that I read. And so I actually presented the concept to my team and then thought it would make a good YouTube video because I felt like it was worth sharing. I'm going to go hard on one concept because I think it's the most important, which is, or actually two probably, thought diffusion. So if you look at somebody who is compulsive, what does compulsive mean? It means that typically when a thought pops up, they take action immediately. For a lot of people, people can get this to work in their favor. And for a lot of other people, it doesn't work in their favor. They have a moment where a thought pops up, I'm kind of hungry, and then they eat an entire bag of chips. That's how people get overweight. They have a thought pop up, like, I'm really stressed, I want a drink. They just go take a drink. It's not that other people don't have those thoughts pop up, but it's that we don't act on them. And so when you look at somebody who's gotten themselves into a place in their life that is not productive, say they're overweight, they're drinking a lot, they're doing drugs, whatever it is that they're doing, right? Their life is not going the way they want to go because of a behavior they are exhibiting. The first place that you can start is from diffusing a thought from an action. And so what that means is this person is usually compulsive. If you look at a binge eater, for example, it's like the moment they feel stressed, a lot of times, I binge ate at some point in my life, it's like they can't help but keep eating, right? It's like this compulsion. The thought, I want to keep eating, it tastes good. I feel so full, but I want to keep eating. And they keep doing it. The only difference between that person and you is that you might have that thought, but you just don't keep eating. And so thought diffusion is just literally separating your thought from an action. And so for a lot of people, again, that have issues in life, they're not able to separate a thought from an action. They take thoughts as directives. If I think I'm hungry, I should eat. If I want a drink, I should have a drink. If I think about this thing, then I should do this other thing. It's almost like you've trained yourself, just like a dog, when it hears sit, it sits. You've trained yourself that when you have this thought, you take this action. And so to diffuse a thought, the first step is to create space from the thought, to recognize that it is just a sentence in your mind. It is not control over you. It is not the all-saying power over your life. It is just a sentence in your mind. It doesn't even need to be true. In fact, most of the time, they're very false. And so for me, thought diffusion is recognizing when I have a thought in my mind. Usually it's one that immediately promotes some kind of like cortisol, right? I'm like, oh, the moment I have that thought, I'm like, oh shit, I'm stressed, right? And then I'm like, shit, okay, let's not avoid that thought. Let's not do anything about it. Let's look at it. Do you think this thought is true? I'm like, I don't know, it could be. And then I go through the process of essentially weighing out the evidence. How certain are you that this thought is true? Like, are you 100% certain? 110% certain? Is it absolutely true in every scenario? It's like, and you basically have to start arguing with yourself against the thought to realize that most thoughts can be disproved. And then you start to build up a case for evidence where it's like, essentially, I start then saying, what are all the reasons this thought isn't true? What are all the things that I've experienced in my life that would tell me this thought that I'm having is not true? And the reason you do that is not to give yourself this crazy reassurance to feel better. It's to then contextualize the thought and see it for what it is. It could be true, it could be not true. It is just a thought that I have in my mind. And if you go through this process of essentially being like both sides of the court against this thought, what happens by the end of this like couple minutes of doing this is you suddenly see the thought separate from yourself. You recognize it as a sentence in your mind, not a part of who you are. And then what that allows you to do is to get space to say, what's the best course of action to take based on this thought? What's going to is this going to make my life better or worse tomorrow if I eat that bag of chips right now? Is this going to make my life better or worse tomorrow if I act on this thought? If I do anything about it? Because what do we also know is that if you act on a thought, whether it's a good or a bad thing, you reinforce the thought to happen again. So a lot of people are like, I don't know, I can't stop thinking about this thing because you've reinforced it in some way, whether it's trying to avoid it or it's trying to do something about it. Lots of thoughts just need to be left the fuck alone. Oh, that's a crazy thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have that all the time. I mean, literally today, I was like, this morning was like the first morning in like months where I was like, damn, I've got a lot of fucked up thoughts going on. I was just like, I had the urge to do something, anything to like escape.
What were some of the thoughts? Like, could you give us an example of like what's going through your head?
I'll give you an example of something it could be. It could be like, I'm so nervous about this test I have coming up. I don't even know like how I'm going to get through it. I'm going to fail. I'm all these things. And then it's like, what are you going to do about that thought? Right. And I think a lot of times what I've just realized is that once you get space from it and you've diffused it, the next question is, what do you do about it? And a lot of the times the answer is nothing. And we live in this society where we think that we have to do something about our thoughts. And a lot of times we just need to leave them the fuck alone and let them be what they are. And they will pass and new ones will come.
And what about for the people who have the opposite problem of procrastination? They just can't get themselves to take action or do anything. How do you tackle that problem?
I would say that for somebody who's procrastinating, you actually want to do the opposite, which is you want to fuse a thought with an action. And so for somebody who constantly procrastinates, first off, I'll say a lot of the times they say it's laziness. I don't think that's true. I think that procrastination, there's usually three things. You're trying to either avoid anxiety, boredom, or you're rebelling. Okay, so when somebody needs to do something, say your boss says this project at work, there's usually three reasons why you avoid it. Either one, it makes you feel anxious. So doing it would cause anxiety. So you avoid doing it because you don't want to feel anxious. Second is that it bores you, right? Like it's not stimulating and it's not exciting. And so you don't want to engage with it. And so you procrastinate because there's more stimulating things you could do with your time, right? It's like if you have a project or something for work, but you have this way more exciting thing, it's like, fuck it, I'll put that one off because I don't really actually like it. And then the last one is rebelliousness, which is somebody else in an authority manner has like said, this is what I would like you to do, whether it be a boss, whether it be a partner, whether it be a spouse, and you don't want to do it. And so what do people do when they rebel is they just put something off as long as possible to punish the person until like the last possible moment when they could do it. And so I do think for the most part, procrastination is actually just, it's the same thing if you break it down. Like we don't not do something because of zero thoughts or feelings. Like there are thoughts or feelings. They're just usually, in my opinion, procrastination is usually avoidance of some. And so it's like, by doing this thing, I will experience one of these negative emotions. Therefore, I would like to put off doing it because I would not like to experience those thoughts or emotions.
And what would you do if you were starting over today with $0 and you wanted to make $1 million? How would you do that?
I'm kidding. I saw that one. I said something on Sunday. Everyone's like, OnlyFans. I was like, Jesus Christ. I don't even show my fucking shoulders.
You know, I mean, you're not wrong, though. I think for a lot of OnlyFans would be probably one of the faster ways to do it. If you want to make a ton of money.
I know,
Absolutely.
but it's not like
go into like a niche, like find an unserved category within OnlyFans.
You should do that, Graham.
It might make a lot of money.
I bet you there's some people that like shirts that look like towels.
I love this shirt.
I do too. It's actually a really cool shirt.
It's tough. You know, I have nothing against it. Like people do what they want to do. It's just like not for me. So I don't even think I could do feet. I think Alex even knows, like, so does my team. Like I've even had a hard time on social media just like wearing what I like to wear because you show a fucking shoulder, people are like,
yeah, feet, but for the right price. Because there's always an argument to be had about that. People come to me, they say, Jack,
love this.
you know, I'll pay you so and so amount for feet pics. I've gotten anywhere from.
Are you for real?
Yeah.
Oh, this has happened multiple times.
Yeah. Like
someone wanted to even buy Jack's shoes.
Uh-huh.
And he was like,
Graham, I posted on my Instagram
like $100.
Why do
For,
people
like,
like
it
your
was
feet so
they
much?
said they would buy me a new pair of shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do they like your feet so much?
I don't know.
You got, like,
I have
hairy feet?
weird feet too because I got like hairy legs, but I have a tree line. So you know how like in mountains, how like it goes above a certain elevation and there's no trees?
Okay.
That's what I have, where it's like hairy legs and then no hair on my feet. Maybe some people like that, but that's besides the point. I've had many offers for feet pics, for buying my shoes and stuff like that. It's a thing. People like it. And for the right price, I probably would. Sorry.
Yeah.
Selling shoes. I mean, you could donate.
He
those,
was, I know, he
you
was trying to get me
Yeah,
to
the shoes.
sell them.
I was trying to make sure the guy was like legit, actually going to pay. You know, it's like a real customer, and isn't like that weird.
Interesting.
You know,
I don't
it's,
know.
it's like it's weird, but you want to make sure there's like a line drawn. It's like
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's just like for me, it's just like I don't know. So it's I don't know.
there's got to be a price.
A price?
It's got to be a price.
Yeah, I mean, there's
I told,
me out.
listen,
It's
I'll
so
tell
much
you
fun,
with a
yeah.
real talk, which is I
Yeah.
told Alex, I said the only time I'll show my body is if Sports Illustrated says they want me on the cover.
that's a pretty good, yeah.
And so, like, I work out. I have a good body. I'm just not going to show it for fucking Instagram.
Okay, what do you think about this? Because this was controversial recently, and I know we're getting a little bit off topic here. Sports Illustrated had a model that took the cover of their magazine that was a little bit on the bigger side. And for a long time on the cover of Sports Illustrated, it was always like very, very fit people with the idealistic,
Yeah.
generally accepted, attractive body. What do you think about something like that?
Well, I'll say this. I'm an advocate of showing healthy bodies. I'm not an advocate of normalizing obesity, which is one of the, like, number one ways that you can actually, like, there's not much more that's worse for your health than being obese. And as somebody who was considered actually technically obese, I feel like I can talk about that. 100 pounds heavier than this? Yeah, that's obese. And so I think for me, it's like towing the line. Like, do women always look like rails who have no fat and all ripped? And no, and that's probably not healthy for them to look like that all the time. And I think, if she gains 15 pounds, like how much, like she's still very attractive, right? But I think when you're towing the line of like, let's say that, let's contort reality and say that unhealthy is healthy. I'm not okay with that because I do know that that actually takes a toll on your body and your lifespan and your quality of life. And so I don't really think promoting that is ideal. I don't think that's something I wouldn't promote to my children. I would not promote to the younger society. I don't know why you would want to promote anything. I don't care that it's being fat. Just like, why would you want to promote anything that is unhealthy for people to other people?
That's a good point. I don't know if you've seen these, but people will go on planes and they'll ask for like, if you go to this airline, you can actually get 2 seats for the price of 1 if you say that you're like above a certain weight or that you need it because of your obesity. And people are like, oh, you're so beautiful just the way you are. But if you need 2 seats on an airplane, you're probably morbidly obese. And that, obviously a lot of people contend that. And
Well, I just think coming as somebody who was very overweight, like, it's not a disease, but we treat it like one. We treat it like something that people can't do anything about. And that keeps them stuck. That's not helping them. Like, when I was overweight, like, people treating me like I was a victim of my weight didn't help me get healthy. That helped me stay stuck. And so, like, I'm an advocate of helping people make their lives better and get healthier. And so, like, normalizing that, I am viscerally opposed to, because that does not help anybody. And I do not think it empowers people to actually change their lives for the better. Do I expect women to look perfect? Absolutely not. I don't look perfect. And so I think there's a difference, and people go to like one extreme or the other. It's like, just because I'm saying that I don't want to normalize obesity does not mean I'm saying everyone should look like a Victoria's Secret model. Like, I also
that's
have seen,
arguably unhealthy.
right. It's like either end can be, right? And so I think, again, I'm an advocate of healthy. I don't know what the person on the cover looked like. I just don't really understand why I don't know what the whole deal is with like normalizing things that are not actually good for you. But
See,
it's
I've
very
seen, like, from my perspective, I've seen like the Men's Health magazine covers, like, growing up. And to me, that just seemed like inspirational. It seemed like the pinnacle of discipline and hard work and like decades of effort that would go into just that one photo. So to me, it's like, I took that as a positive. I never looked at anything like that, but
Yeah.
I looked at that as something
Motivational.
cool. Like, it is. It's heavily motivational.
Well, when people tell you that you being overweight is not your fault, and that's genetic, and that you're predisposed, and that you have a disease, it's not fair that somebody else looks that way.
I think it toes the line. I think there can be like thyroid issues and things that are beyond your control.
There's
but
so
then
few things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's a pretty
I
small
know. I
percentage.
guess I'm
And I
trying
think
to, yeah.
It like if everyone's been
Yeah.
telling you your entire life that you are a product of your environment and there's nothing you can do about it, it's an immutable thing, then the only rational next step is acceptance, which is really interesting. So you can't necessarily blame those people if everyone around them, like you said, you post a video about needing 2 seatbelts on a plane and getting 2 seats for free, and everyone's like, oh, this is so amazing or whatever. Like you just see that and you're like, okay, well, this is good. I can accept the fact that I can't change this.
Yeah. I mean, I was a personal trainer for I don't even know how many years before gym launch. And so like I worked with many people who were clinically obese, and there's a lot of other stuff that goes into it in terms of like, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I know in the fitness industry, and then they're like, this person's telling me they're following the meal plan. I'm like, no. Ask them what they eat when nobody's looking. Okay. Cause that's what they do. I did it as well. So I know. And again, I say this because it's like, I have had my firsthand experience, which is like people lie to themselves, and of course there are the edge cases where somebody does have a medical issue. I am not speaking to that, but like a lot of people lie to themselves, and that's what gets you stuck in those situations, and it keeps you there. And so me lying to you doesn't help you get out of it.
How much of that do you think is mental versus physical output? If someone's overweight and they're trying to lose weight and they're trying to get in shape.
Explain mental versus physical output.
Mental could be having a mental issue or having mental roadblocks that prevent them from achieving their goals.
I think that most of the time it's behavioral issue with eating. Like you don't get obese from not working out. You get really big from eating compulsively. And so in my opinion, a lot of it is compulsive eating. It's just every time you have a negative thought, every time this thing occurs, every time you're at this party, you overeat, right? And then you normalize the sense or the feeling of feeling overly full. And so a lot of it comes down to just, I wouldn't even say it's mental, I would say it's behavioral. Because a lot of people think, oh, I have to resolve this unresolved trauma from when I was a child and my father said I was fat. Guess what? Everyone told me I was fucking fat when I was a kid. I need to go back and redo my fucking life to lose weight. I just needed to stop putting shit in my mouth. Like for real though. It's like, I don't need to go resolve my trauma with my mother. I just need to now, as an adult, what happens is like maybe something that when we were younger created this maladaptive behavior when we were 15. But we've taken that behavior and we've done it for 10 years. Do we need to change the situation, or do we need to change the behavior that we adapted to from the situation? We need to take the behavior. We don't need to worry about the situation or why it happened. We just need to change the behavior that resulted from that situation. We cannot change the past.
So here's an interesting thought. It seems like people are gaining more weight now than they did 20 or 30 years ago. How much of that is purely just the food that we eat is so bad, is so processed? There's so much sugar injected into everything.
In my opinion, it's actually just the quantity of food. Because you can eat processed food. I'm not saying you're going to feel the same, and I'm not saying your gut is going to feel good and all that stuff, but like you're not going to necessarily gain weight. You will be inflamed. So like I think a lot of people conflate these. They say, oh, I eat these processed foods and I immediately gain weight. You gained water weight because you are inflamed, because you are more likely to be allergic and have sensitivities to processed food. And so like if I go out and eat McDonald's tonight, I'm probably going to blow up 5 pounds because of the sodium and the processed food and the fact that it bothers my stomach. But I'm not going to like actually have gained 5 pounds. If I ate an entire head of broccoli that's 1,000 calories, it's going to do the same thing to my body as 1,000 calories of McDonald's in terms of weight, not in terms of all the other things. And so for me, I think it's just the quantity of the food that we're eating. And actually, I think a lot of the diet culture it works against us in a way, because a lot of people, what they've done is if you look at the volume of food that we eat compared to like 30 years ago, like look at someone's like how much food's on their plate. What even happens now with diet culture is that they're teaching you how to eat things that look like more calories than they are. So for example, there's like a lot of recipes online where they create these ice creams that have like 200 calories, but it's huge because you put xanthan gum in it, however you say it. One, that hurts your stomach like a motherfucker. But two, you're teaching yourself to be insanely full. It's like this sense where you're very full, but you're not satiated. And so then those same people, what if you go and you eat actual real ice cream in that quantity? And I've seen that happen a lot for people too. And at the end of the day, I think it's just better to learn portion control. And like, you don't necessarily need to feel full to stop eating. And I think a lot of people don't understand that not feeling full is not unhealthy. And feeling hungry is also not unhealthy. In fact, most people who are at a healthy body weight feel hungry a lot more of the time. And so, when I was overweight, it was like I never actually felt truly hungry. But like when I'm at a healthy weight, like a very healthy BMI, I feel hungry, I don't know, 2/3 of the day. And so, especially because like I lift weights pretty hard. So like that kind of increases your desire to eat. And so I think a lot of it comes down to just like what we think an actual portion of food is and how much we're eating volume wise.
One thing I want to talk about that specifically is Graham and I don't think we could relate any more than with what you just said. It's like we both have talked about this before. Our love for the feeling of being full.
Oh, man.
It is my absolute favorite. That's why we go to all you can eat sushi. That's why I love waddling out of that restaurant.
You
right?
feel so
and you
bad
feel
afterwards.
horrible, but so happy. And I don't know why there could be such a dissonance between how your brain feels and how your body feels in that moment. So it's something I've been working on lately, and I've been cutting down, like you said, the volume of food that I've been eating. So it's kind of a coincidence we're talking about this now. And I'm hungry right now. And I'll probably be hungry for another couple of hours, and I'll have a meal, and I'll get a little bit hungry later at night. But to a lot of people, they kind of recoil at that idea, because also there's a fine line between, you know, teaching standard dieting practices and good dieting practices, and then taking that to the extreme where people start to develop eating disorders and stuff of that nature. How do you balance like the two? Like if people have a naturally like a bad gut reaction to that, what would you tell them?
I've been to both ends of the spectrum. You know, when I was in high school, for a period of time, like I did not eat. I ate 300 calories a day and I ran 8 miles. I then like would make myself throw up when I was in college. I mean, like I've gone through the whole gambit. And I was also really fat. And so like I've gone through the entire thing. And I think where I've come to now is a place that I really like, which is like I don't think about food that much. I eat to fuel my body, and I accept that it's okay to feel hungry. And I think a lot of it came from realizing that people use food for a lot of things, and very seldom is it to just nourish their body. And I also don't really care a ton if I undereat one day or if I overeat one day. I think it'll balance out over a week or a month. And so I think I just like try to pay less attention to it, because like I'll actually just put it like this. I looked at it and I was just like, after being in the fitness industry for a while, and I was like, dude, I don't want to spend my life thinking about fucking calories and food. Like, not that I don't want to be healthy. Like I now could calculate a calorie. Like I counted on MyFitnessPal for 12 years straight. I mean, Alex saw the streak, 12 freaking years on MyFitnessPal. I know enough now, but like, I don't want to spend my life overthinking food. And I think we have this weird culture now where like people make entire livings off of overthinking about food. They're like, did you know what's in that orange? Oh, did you know what's in this? Oh my God, there's the saturated oils. Did you hear about this stuff? It's like, oh my God, I don't give a fuck. What if I don't care if I live 2 years less? What if I don't? Because I don't think about that stuff. I think the time that I would waste thinking about all of it, I'd rather just lose those years at the end of my life, because I don't want to waste them being this weirdo who's like completely obsessed with fucking organic toilet paper, which is like where I see people going nowadays. And so, not to say it's weird, but like, it's just like, is that what you want to spend your time on? We have all these issues and all these things on earth and all these things you could do with your freaking time, and you want to talk about fucking calories. You know what I mean? Like, and like to a degree that's not like, oh, let's help you lose weight, but like nitpicking about them. And I think that's where I got to, is I just got fed up with it. I was like, I just don't want to think about this at all. I'm just going to do what I want to do. I'm going to eat what I want to eat. Might vary a little bit each day, but I'm just not going to think about it. And I think for a lot of people, in terms of, there's like the side of the industry, which is, you know, seems unhealthy. Like, oh, you know, you're under eating or Ozempic or all these things. There's the other side where it's like normalizing too much. I encourage people to try everything with an open mind. I mean, that's what I'll say, is like, try all of it if you want. Find what works for you. At the end of the day, calorie deficit can be doing keto. It can be vegetarian. It can be, you know, eating fucking candy. You can be in a calorie deficit. And so just find what works for you and what aligns with your goals in life. I honestly hate the industry. And I even, we're talking about it and there's gonna be clips. I'm like, because people are so dogmatic. They're like, well, you're wrong. It's like, how am I wrong about this if it aligns with what I want in life? And so I think for people, they have to figure out what they want, what's important to them. Not everyone wants to be jacked. Not everyone wants to be super skinny. Not everyone wants to, you know, cares if they live an extra 10 years because they would rather enjoy cake. And so at the end of the day, you know, even what I said about like normalizing obesity, if somebody came to me and they were like, I'm fine with the fact that I'm going to die 20 years earlier because of my weight, I'd be like, all right, fuck it. I ain't got nothing to say. Like, you know, I assume that you want to live longer, but like, if you don't, okay. You know, I don't know. I just like, people can do whatever they want. And I don't care if anyone listens to my advice.
Although really quick, before we go into that, as I'm sure you could tell over these last few months, we've spent a lot of money bringing you these episodes. We've traveled across the country multiple times. We've even gone international, and these costs add up. However, it doesn't need to be this expensive to do something similar to us, and that is where our sponsor, StreamYard, wants to help.
What makes StreamYard so great is that you can create high-quality content with just the click of a button. All you need is a camera and an internet connection, and you can stream content directly from your browser. They also make it incredibly simple to do virtual interviews. Here's a little fun fact. We've done a couple here on the Iced Coffee Hour, and we used StreamYard. It was high quality, it looked amazing, it was very simple to use, and we loved it. One of my favorite things about StreamYard is their multi-stream feature, which is incredibly valuable. You can film yourself on StreamYard, and they distribute that footage to all of these other platforms like Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and more.
Hands down, StreamYard is the best way to begin creating high-quality content for absolutely free because they have a free package if you want to get started down below in the description. This means it costs you absolutely no money upfront whatsoever to get started.
Once again, guys, I just recommend you try it out. If you're looking to get into content, it literally costs you nothing. It is completely free. Try them out with the link down below in the description. Thank you so much, StreamYard, and back to the episode.
You know, I don't know. I just like people can do whatever they want. And I don't care if anyone listens to my advice.
That's really interesting. I appreciate the how you contend with the dogma, because I think that's really a problematic thing for a lot of people that have a voice online, is just telling people that this is the right way, this is the wrong way, you have to follow me.
I know. And it's honestly, fitness and diet is actually worse than anything I've ever seen. I mean, even business, like it's like people can generally agree on certain things.
Yeah.
Diet, I mean, honestly, how defensive somebody is over their diet, I correlate with their intelligence. I do.
But what if they're
if you're
right?
defensive,
What if they're so right that that's why they're defensive?
Maybe they're right for themselves, but they might not be right for everybody.
I mean, I don't know many incredibly smart people who spend their day trolling online, arguing with people. So, like, I think they would be doing something else with their time. And so, for me, it's just like, the more defensive somebody is over something, the more it's just like, because there's so many things that I know, or I know people in the diet industry know, and they know like the source of truth and everything. And then it's just like, they're like, what's the fucking point? Because it's like a lot of people just are swayed by the things that they're reading and the articles that they think are legit and the studies they think are correct. But half the fucking studies aren't even conducted correctly. Half of them, the variables aren't even controlled. You
like
can't even
rat
trust
analysis.
studies anymore. Yeah. So it's just like, I don't know. It just feels like a giant waste of potential of a lot of really smart people to be arguing about if I eat eggs or fish.
So if you were starting over with nothing,
I would not go into fitness.
A little bit of a tangent.
Yeah.
So if you're starting over with nothing, from $0, how would you become successful step by step?
$0. Do I have my skills?
Yeah, I would say so. Or do you think for the well, let's make it
I'm
more
trying to make
applicable for
it-
the average
yeah.
viewer. So if they want to do something,
You have the average skills of the average person.
Yeah. I would get into sales. I think I would first go, and I would go somewhere that had the highest ability to earn commission, and I would learn sales. I mean, like, I think at the end of the day, like, if you have no skills and you're starting from scratch, whether you want to build a business, whether you want to have a job, whether you want to make, and especially if you want to make $1 million, like, the fundamental skill that you want to learn is how to sell something, in my opinion. And so I would find a job in sales, and then I would probably figure out if I could just sell it myself eventually. I don't know what it would be. I mean, like, car sales is like what my default was. If like it didn't work out with gym launch, I was like, I could just sell cars, you know, like something. But I think it's like, it's the highest leverage skill I think you can learn when you are that young. Like, I have seen so many people, I'll tell you right now, like, in terms of people that are within our portfolio team, like within all the companies, everything, the highest performing closer, or like salesperson, whatever you want to call them, right? 18 years old. 18. Highest performing.
What makes them so good?
His character. He just does the work. It's like he shows up early, he stays late, he makes extra calls, he takes the calls nobody else wants to take, he just takes the leftovers. And so I think that's what makes him so good. And I think for me, the reason I would go into sales if I was starting again from scratch and just learn that skill is because I feel like it teaches you so many fundamentals about business. Like, it's not like I've ever stopped selling. I sell now, you know, employees on the vision of the company. I sell partners on the vision of working together. I'm just not like selling customers. And so I think it teaches influence, it teaches hard work, it teaches capacity, like it expands someone's work capacity. And notice I didn't say that I would start over from scratch building something on my own, because I actually think like a way to leapfrog yourself is to learn from others. Like working for other people prior to having my own business, if I hadn't done that, I do not think I would have been able to succeed as I had, because I had models of what good looked like. I watched them fail. I got to learn from their experiences. Like I got to watch them make mistakes and then not make those for myself. And so like, it's funny because somebody asked me, it was like 2 days ago, they were like, oh, something you always want to be an entrepreneur. I was like, I want to be part of something big. I want to be part of a team. And like, I've actually accepted that maybe to get to my goals of where I really want to go, I'm going to have to take on more partners, and I'm going to have less of a stake in what I own. And like, that means like, again, it goes to a different, it's almost like losing freedom in order to gain your goal. And I'm never afraid to do that. And I think in the beginning, when you're first starting out, I think the goal should be to learn, not to have the ultimate amount of freedom, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you think anybody could make it in sales?
I think that you need to have a capacity to accept rejection. So for me, I think the reason that like I think, for example, the reason there's a lot more men in sales than women is because women have been socialized that in a way that they get less rejection than men. More men experience rejection. Just think about in the dating world, right? You've probably been said no to many times because you go approach women.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah. No, absolutely.
But what do women do? They don't even go half the time approach men. They just wait for men to come to them, and they don't have to be rejected. And so I think that's why fundamentally there's a lot more male salespeople than women. But I think that, you know, the women that I do know that are in sales, I mean, they kill it. And a lot of them, they're very thick-skinned. They don't care if somebody says no. And they're very driven. And so I just think a lot of it has to do around how you're socialized. You know, for me, it was more just like I didn't have a fear of what was going to happen if somebody said no, which is why I felt like it was okay. I did watch a lot of people who failed and they were just terrified of the no. And again, I think it's like you have to aim for the no, because the more no's you get, the closer you get to a yes. And so for people who are constantly trying to avoid getting said no to, they also avoid success.
What's one of the biggest mistakes people make in sales?
Thinking that sales tactics and hacks and tricks will mask lack of conviction. At the end of the day, if you look at the best salespeople are often people who own the fucking company. Why is that? Because they have the most conviction about it. They truly believe in what they're doing. At least you hope so, right? And I think a lot of what I see out there about sales, like I actually don't talk about it much, because I think the reason I was good at sales is I always believed in what I was selling. I was selling in the very beginning for many years weight loss, and I knew how to help people lose weight. And I was passionate about it because I had been there, and I realized how horrible it feels to not want to look at yourself in the mirror, to literally run away from mirrors, to never turn the lights on when you're naked. Like, I experienced all that pain myself. And so I truly wanted to help people, and I was convicted, like, this is the way you've got to do it. And so what I see nowadays, though, is like a lot of tactics and tricks meant to manufacture conviction, manufacture urgency, manufacture scarcity, because the product actually sucks and because you don't actually believe in what you're doing. And so I think the worst mistake you can make is to sell something that sucks, to sell something you don't believe in, and to work at a company where you don't actually feel passionate about what they're doing, because it shows. And all of those things absolutely affect the lifetime value of the customer. Like, it's like people think I'm saying, they're like, oh, well, I'm going to lose sales if I do that. Okay, well, you're going to lose them eventually anyways, because customers that are sold in ways that are like on false premise, those customers don't stay for life. They're not loyal to your brand. They realize what you've done once they get in there and later on and notice that things aren't quite exactly how you said. And so it doesn't benefit anybody in the long run.
Do you worry about AI ever taking over sales?
I definitely think that there's a lot of ways in which it's going to change the industry of sales. I think that for like enterprise sales, I don't see it taking over anytime soon. So people who sell very expensive stuff, I don't see that happening, because the sale's not straightforward. It's not like you have like one conversation, you're going from there. And usually there's a lot of industries, trust me, where like they still fly out for everything. It's like, got to fly on site, you got to fly here. And it's just like, that's just how the industry is. And so there's a lot more like that people aren't talking about. I think lower ticket, high transaction sales, those definitely are more at risk in terms of you don't need to build a relationship. You're probably not going to talk to this person again. It's not a high priced item. I definitely think that there's a likelihood that AI can take over there, but it's not something I'm worried about. I've definitely looked into it. I've, talked to a few founders of different softwares that do that. I've listened. They're not at a point where I feel comfortable using any of those things yet in any of my companies, but I mean, the moment that they are, I'll definitely try them.
Yeah, I could see there being some really convincing AI chatbots. So if you have a product on a website for sale and you want to ask questions about it,
Yeah.
that AI chatbot could sell you so well. Just imagine prompts like if you put in this, it spits out this. This objection, you say this.
Yeah.
It could get really good.
It would be really interesting. I think we're going to enter a time where there's going to be a lot of one-person businesses once we get to that point where this kind of software is fleshed out, because I know people who already have it. For example, I'm invested in one where they have one person, and he's been able to build everything else to be automated and coded and have artificial intelligence. And so I think that's going to become more popular, because if you also look at like the trend of like what people want, a lot of people are wanting to work alone, remotely, by themselves. They're wanting less interaction. It's the opposite of everything I like. But I do think that that's appealing to a lot of people, and this will enable that.
Yeah. What's that business? Could you give us some details about like what it is?
Yeah, so it's a business that trades appointments online. So basically, you know how you like StubHub, you sell tickets?
Yeah.
They trade appointments. It could be a DMV appointment. It could be a restaurant reservation. It could be a hair appointment at a salon. Like basically, it's arbitrage on scarce appointments.
Is there like a market for it? So, for example, people pay for a different appointment time.
Yeah.
I saw an article on CNBC that said that there was like some 17-year-old kid who was working like a desk job who was making $55,000 a year buying appointments or reservations at restaurants in New York City.
Yeah,
and they're
that's it.
reselling them. That's insane.
Yeah.
And there's someone else who's making like 70 grand a year part-time. So they're like at their desk job, just like, oh, I'm going to make this appointment like a few months in advance and get to sell it.
Yeah, that's it.
I heard they're cracking down on it. I thought
They're
it was
trying.
a genius idea, but then I thought, how could you crack down besides just like making maybe like a non-refundable deposit, or like making it different, like a money transaction where you have to like charge $100 to the card and then that gets off the bill, or like
It's a government level that's trying to crack down on it. But this is what they do with any new market. It's like Uber. It's like Airbnb. It's like Ticketmaster. Like all of them had to fight the government trying to say that you cannot resell this thing. And it's funny because people like, oh my God, people would buy a reservation. Yeah, well, people didn't think that you could resell tickets either. And guess what? Now there's an entire market for it. And a bunch of people making money. And so at the end of the day, like, it's going to be really hard to stop when you're making more money for the people, you're making more money for the restaurants, and you're making, you're fulfilling a need that some customers have.
Now, what do you say to the people who really dislike the idea because they say, I'm trying to get a reservation, but someone else has already reserved all the spots and is trying to resell them for a profit? What do you say to those people?
Well, I would say this is how the
Supply
economy
and
works.
demand.
Yeah, supply and demand and the economy. And it's not like we're selling reservations at Applebee's, okay? We're selling reservations at like Carbone and Delilah. Like if you're going there in general and you can't pay $50 for a reservation, then you probably shouldn't go there in general.
You know what's interesting is there's a lady that provides a service here in Vegas because the DMV here is horrible. So many people are moving to the city of Vegas.
Yeah.
So it's usually like you show up
I have to go.
for walk-ins. So if it's something with regard to a car, I have the lady for you.
Okay,
so
I need it.
This lady, she runs an office with several employees. It's a big operation. And I paid her, I think it was like $100 or $150 because she books out a DMV appointment every single day. And then she gets people because you can do it 2 months in advance, but you need to be first in line. So she knows how to do that. She knows what time to log on, what time to book the appointments for. She does that every single day. And she has, let's say 15 people. She sends you all the documents. You sign the documents. You give it back to her. She goes in and just goes boom, 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 boom. And she has someone at the DMV that like, she knows how to do it quick. So she's also not taking up that much time. It's probably like the same amount of time as someone else in line. She gets it all done. And then she'll mail you your license plate. She'll do anything like that. And it's crazy because otherwise, Graham and I, when we first moved here, we had to go to the DMV. And didn't we go at like we woke up at 6 a.m. because they opened at 7 and they had a line that we thought was for a concert because it was so big. It was like 2,000 people in line.
No joke, it probably was a mile long.
And we asked the people what time they got there. They said 9 p.m. the night before.
Yeah.
Those were the people at the front of the line. This is for the Las Vegas DMV and one of them.
Yeah, no, in fairness, this was like 2020, so everyone was moving to Vegas. Everything was shut down. They only allowed a certain amount of people inside.
Yeah.
But like when they opened at 8 a.m.,
last night.
a guy would walk up to the line and like give someone a yellow card, and they're like, you're the last one. Everyone else goes home. even if you've been waiting there since
For
like
hours.
3 o'clock in the
Yeah.
morning, you go home and you try again.
And we had woke
Yeah.
at like 6 o'clock a.m. to be there at 6:30 because we're like,
that.
we're
That's
going to get
Saturday
there
morning.
30 minutes early and we're going to be totally fine. And we drive up and it's just line
from
all the way
line.
down the street, wrapping around like
crazy.
buildings. It was insane.
I'm gonna get that number from you when we're done with
Yeah.
it.
But speaking of that, we actually used a similar sort of service. This guy that we knew for Disneyland had this AI software that would automatically scrape reservations for certain restaurants within Disneyland, and as soon as someone canceled, it would pick it up. So if you say, I want to go to this restaurant this day, Disneyland, it just throughout the day, someone's going to cancel and
Yeah.
it picks it up first.
That's
Instantly.
really interesting.
Instantly.
I mean, I think that stuff's
Yeah.
going to become more and more common because people are more cognizant of where they spend their time. And so people are more willing, we have this generation at least is more willing to spend money to save their time on things like that.
Yeah.
It's
Now,
convenient.
That business of reservations, how did you go about working in or finding out about this business? Did they reach out to you? Did you reach out to, like,
No, neighbor.
that was a neighbor?
Yeah, so we met him in the elevator. It was truly an elevator pitch.
Really?
Yeah.
And he
it's just like-
recognized you and was like, hey, this is my business.
No. This was years ago when the company was like barely, it didn't even have revenue at the point. It was literally like an idea. And we met the guy and his wife in the elevator of our building. And we just like immediately, me and Alex, whenever we move somewhere, like when we're trying to meet people, the first thing we do is like, the elevator's a great spot. So we'll be like, oh, if we see people that are around our age and they're married, we'll be like, hey, we should like exchange numbers and we go to dinner or something. And so we're like, oh, hi, like you guys, and we said hi and they seemed like super friendly and cool. And so we're talking, we get to the downstairs lobby. We're like, we should like do dinner sometime or something. He's like, oh, I have to tell you about my company. And then he starts talking about the company and me and Alex are like, this sounds very interesting. And so then we end up going to dinner and then we went to another dinner and then we like started becoming friends. And then he said that he was like raising money and we were like, well, fuck it. I don't know. Like it doesn't have any revenue. We have no idea, but like, let's just buy X% and we'll just see what happens. Then we have something to talk about at dinner because now we're invested. And we did that. And that was maybe 3.5 years ago. And now the company is obviously much bigger because it's all over the news.
Yeah.
And so that was all that happened. Really fascinating. And we've just stayed in touch as friends. They used to live here in Las Vegas and now they live in Miami.
That's so cool.
So I think you've said this before that your goal was $1 billion. Is that true?
Yes.
Why do you say yes as though there's a little stipulation?
I
or
think
something?
$1 billion's way too small. That's all.
$1 billion is so. What would be more appropriate?
10 billion.
10.
20 billion.
What is 10 billion? What can you do with 10 billion that you can't do with one?
Well, here's the other thing is that it's not like anyone, when the goal is $1 billion, it's like, I want $1 billion in cash in my bank account. It's like, I want to be worth $1 billion, right? And so that's a combination of equity, cash, all these other things. And so I think I've just realized like the more information I've gotten and the more investments we've made and the more success I've seen come to fruition that $1 billion on its own is probably not as far away as I thought. And it doesn't feel challenging enough. And so I think if I think in terms of 10 billion or 20 billion, that's really challenging for my skill right now, at least. Like $1 billion, if you have 2 companies that like hit it out of the park, I mean, that's all I would need at acquisition for it to eventually like have my net worth be worth $1 billion. If I own, 50% of each company and like each one becomes a couple billion, then it's like, and like that stuff just, it's a numbers game in terms of like you take on a certain amount of companies, you watch and see like a handful of them, maybe a quarter of them or a fifth of them, they end up being like the unicorns that like really grow. And then you just kind of weed out the others over time. And I think I understand that now. And so because of that, I think to myself, like, well, what would be even more challenging? Because I think we'll get there sooner than we think. Based on how the next 18 months play out, I think it could be pretty soon. And so I want, like, what's the next thing? What are we going to do after that?
Okay, but I imagine you don't want the $1 billion or 10 or 20 billion just for the sake of having 10, 20 billion dollars. It's like, what is the motivating factor behind that goal?
It's always the same thing, which is like, one of our core values is competitive greatness. It's wanting to be great for the journey, not because of the outcome of the journey. And I think with anything in life, like when I first lost weight and I did a fitness competition, when I moved out to California, like all these things, it's like, of course I could not do those things. And of course there's benefit to these things, but at the same time, that's not why I've ever done anything. It's because of who do I have to become to do those things and do them in a way that I'm proud. Like there's a lot of ways to make money that I'm sure you guys know of a million ways, and it's not ethical, right? Or at least it's not aligned with my ethics. For me, it's like, it's about showing that it's possible to do it in a way where I maintain, and if not maintain, deepen my integrity to my values. And so for me, that's always what I anchor to, is like, I would love to be that person for myself and who I was when I was younger. Like, really, that's it. Like $1 billion. Like, I mean, the cool part about having billions of dollars is just the things you can do with it. Like at that point, like you can build hospitals, you can build schools, you can have like a real impact on the community. You know, like, yes, we make free content and all that right now, but like, I want to like build stuff. And you need resources to do that. And resources come from money. You trade money for a resource. And so for me, that's what's exciting about when we get there and have that. It's just being able to make a bigger impact on like the greater community. But it's honestly just about the journey to get there. It's like, I want to show myself that it's possible. And I think that for me, what I've just found is that to have a life worth living, I always have to have a really big goal that I'm going after. It aligns everything in my life, and it's always just made me a lot happier.
One thing that I've always emphasized in success is the importance of having a good mentor. For example, Graham and I, we've both had plenty of different really good mentors in our lives that have definitely pushed us forward and provided us with inspiration or information that can help us.
Yeah.
Who have been your biggest mentors thus far, and who are your mentors right now? Like as you climb this economical and financial ladder, I'm imagining your mentors just start changing.
I don't have any.
None.
No.
So who do you look for guidance? Do you model other people that you see?
I don't even look at what anybody does. Honestly, we have each other. Like a lot of why we're able to do what we do is I think me and Alex work so well together and in many ways learn so much from each other. And I would say that we have a lot of friends who are ahead of us. Now, I don't take advantage of a friendship and ask for help on like X, Y, and Z, but I would say that a combination of, I know a lot of people who are ahead and what they've done. I hire people who know what to do to get to the next level, so I can learn from the people that I hire and put on my team. And I think at the next piece is, you know, it's so fucking weird. Like, as I say it to you guys, I'm just like, man, this sounds like so egotistical to be like, no, we just know what to do. But I think we thought a very long time about what we were going to build. You know, we had 2 years and it's working and it's all going in the right direction. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's a tough question because I mean, it'd be nice to have a mentor. There's definitely times, but I think right now, honestly, I just have a very strong team.
That's interesting. But you would say in the beginning of like your journey, you think it's important, I'm assuming, to find mentors.
I do think so. Because in the beginning, you don't know what good looks like and you don't have any clarity. And so I think it's important to surround yourself with people who do have clarity. You know, like if somebody's starting an e-commerce business, I'm like, go find someone who's building an e-commerce business. Like there's a billion people out there saying, I'll teach you how to go from blah, blah, blah to blah, blah, blah. Right? Because in the beginning, going from 0 to 1 million, in my opinion, the problem is that you don't know what you're doing. And so find somebody who does know what they're doing, or find free information that tells you what to do. There's lots of different ways you can fill that gap. It doesn't need to be a mentor. It can just be a friend. It can be a book. It can be whatever. I think it depends on your level of intelligence, because I would say level of intelligence is how vague of a direction you can take and run with it. So the more intelligent somebody is, the more vague direction they can take and still carry out the task. I think in the beginning, you have to be able to assess for yourself, am I intelligent enough to figure this out with very vague direction, or do I need very explicit instruction to figure this out for myself? And that's just a question you've got to be able to answer for yourself.
How do you feel like a billionaire thinks and acts differently than the average person?
Well, I can tell you, because I had a conversation with my friend who told me that if I want to be a billionaire, I need to be more ruthless with my time. Because he's like me, he's a founder and a CEO. And so we get to talk a lot about the things that like we each go through. He exited his company for multiple billion and then now has started a different one. So he's back in the grind. And so it's cool to like relay that stuff off of each other. But I remember like there was a time where I said like, I'm annoyed, like this partner called me and this is going on this. And he's like, yeah, Leila, that's a billionaire, doesn't even take that phone call. And I was like, yeah, that hurt. It didn't actually hurt. I don't give a fuck. But I was like, all right, yeah, I'm not taking that phone call anymore then. I think a lot of it is just, I've realized that my time is like the most precious resource that exists in the company. It's not the money. And so as I want to continue to level up, I look at leveling up my time, which is, it's just more and more getting yourself out of any and everything that possibly isn't the one thing that's going to drive everything forward. In the beginning, it's like, I need customer service, I need finance, I need this, I need that. Now it's like, I have a driver, I have security, I have somebody who buys fucking Q-tips and makeup for me. I have people who get my wardrobe. I have, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just continues to level up because I've just learned like, if this even takes 10 minutes of my day today, it's not worth it because I could have spent 10 minutes thinking about how we're going to get here. And so for me, I think the biggest difference is what they spend their time on. Like, time precedes money. How you manage your time dictates how much money you make, in my opinion. And so if anyone wants to master money, they have to first manage their time.
Do you ever worry about getting out of touch by having everything kind of done for you and you not like being in the weeds, seeing like what's going on with all the little things?
I do not worry about that because I care too much. Like I care so much about the people that work for me. That's why I love, if I could just hire a CEO, like, and just be the founder and have, like, I know how to delegate and have people do things, but I love investing in people and teaching people and making people's lives better by creating a great place to work. Like, that is truly what fulfills me and like why I do what I do every day. That's why I make content. It's why that's what I love doing. And so for me, I'm not worried about getting out of touch because I'm not out of touch with myself. And I think at the end of the day, you can be out of touch with what it's like to go to the grocery store or what it's like to do this, but I'm not out of touch with my values and who I want to be and how I treat people. And I treat, the person that is, cleaning the building the same way that I'm going to treat an executive. And that's just because of who I am and what values I want to uphold, not because of anything else. And so, no. And at the same time, I think it'd be selfish of me to stay in touch with those things because if I am responsible, if I have the capability to provide thousands of jobs to people and jobs that make their lives better, then if you actually think about it, it would be selfish of me to keep things because I feel judged for giving them away because that time could have been spent creating 100 more jobs for people. And that's how I have to convince myself to look at it, to feel okay with it.
Okay, that's fair.
Because I do think it's true.
How are you able to work like 14 hours a day without getting tired or overdosing on like caffeine?
Well, I think actually if you drink a lot of caffeine, it makes it worse. Notice this, I drink decaf.
I noticed that and that kind of shocked me. I was like, wow.
Yeah, no.
Impressive.
What's the point to drink a coffee then?
I mean, there's like 15 milligrams of caffeine in it. It's like a little bit. I do get tired. I think I've learned how to load balance myself better though, which is, for example, like I know that I can gas it on meetings if then the next day I have all deep work day. And I'm working on a project, I'm not talking to people. And then the day after that, I have a content day. And then, so I try to theme my days, which helps a lot in terms of stamina of getting through the day. Because if you look at people who really love their jobs, for example, they have a lot of variability in their jobs. And I like variability in my week, not in my days. Because I can get a lot of one thing done in a day if it's like, this is what today is dedicated to. But if I have to go, like yesterday, for example, I did work, and then I did content, and then I did 5 hours of meetings, and then I did a 2-hour dinner. And I felt hungover today. And I knew yesterday, I was like, oh, this is not a good idea. I don't normally do this, but I'd been sick, so I was trying to catch up. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to just try and do a bunch in one day. And what happened was what I know happens if I do that, which is like I feel hungover the next day. Makes no sense. I got plenty of sleep, water, food. It just like feel like you get hit by a bus. But at the same time, I think I've engineered an environment where one, I try to theme my days so that I don't run into that. Because I think if you focus on like one thing each day, it makes it, you feel like you have much more stamina to get through the day. I do break up my days a lot of times with exercise or with like a break to see Alex or to do something that just like changes my gears. But then I think the next piece to it is it's really hard to work hard on something if you don't really like it. Like if you really don't like it, like when I, for example, have a day full of one-on-ones, I'm lit up by the end of the day. I love talking to my team. I love developing them. I love like thinking about them in my free time. I love watching them grow as people. You know how many people would say, like, I had one-on-ones a day and they're like, I'm fucking exhausted because they don't like it, right? And so, like, when I tell people, I'm like, it's not like I'm forced to work this much. Like, I could probably do my job in half the time, but I put all my discretionary effort towards it because I like it, you know? And so I think if you engineer a business where what you do is what you want to do, then you want to do more of it. And, you know, I have a business where I get to work with the person I love the most in life. And when he makes the business better, it makes my life better. When I make the business better, it makes his life better. When he gets better, I get better. When I get better, he gets better. You know, so it's great for my marriage. It's great for, like, in terms of having this office and having the people in the building. Like, we've fostered so many friendships and relationships, like watching people like stay here until 8 p.m. and get here at 5 a.m. together and work out together and like build these relationships. Like, it's all very fulfilling to me. And so those things give me energy. It doesn't take energy away from me. Do I feel like if I were to stop, right, and just be like, do I feel tired? Like, yes, I can feel tired, but I'm too excited about what I'm working on most of the time that, like, I'm just not thinking about the fact that I'm tired. It's kind of like a kid that's like, you know, you know what it is? It's like when you're a kid and you want to stay up all night because you're just like so excited to be hanging out with your friend and you're tired and you're like this, but you're like, I just love hanging out with my friend. I want to keep hanging out. That's how I feel. And I think a lot of people don't get that because, you know, probably also when I first started making content, I was just terrified of being on camera. And so I'm like, work 14 hours a day. But I do it because I like really love it, you know, and I'm grateful for that because it's taken me a long time. Like 8 years ago, I didn't know what I really liked about running a business when I didn't. I was trying everything. So I was doing everything. And so there was a lot of stuff I didn't like doing. And there's a lot of stuff I don't like doing now. But I've at least found that there's a lot of things I can gain from doing things I don't like. I get to be honest about it, tell my team, show them, hey, this is an example for you guys. Like, I'm going to do this. I don't like doing it, but I'm going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out anyways. I'm going to get really good at it and I'm going to pass it off to somebody. So I don't know. I feel just very grateful for what I get to do every day because there's been a lot of times in my life where I really wished for what I had now.
What's your schedule like today from beginning to end?
Today was a weird day because we're kind of in this weird transition where, so today would have been, why this is scheduled, a content day, quote. But I'm moving away from that and I'm moving into more of a, we film the moment I've written something because it does better, it performs better, it's more fun for me. And so now we're kind of changing to like, we're just every day deciding like we're gonna film something today or not film something today. So it's like filming one video at a time versus like, I would have normally before this filmed for 3 or 4 hours, done this. But I just hated that too because I was friggin' exhausted. Because like, as you know, like if anything, it is hard to do for 14 hours a day. It's make content. And like I did it in the beginning, but I also think that's actually why I would say I tend to come off very like, I would say professional, robotic, whatever people interpret it as. It gets worse if I'm tired. And so I would watch my content and be like, ooh, that's tough. And so I was like, I don't want that anymore. I don't want people to perceive me that way. And so I realized, I was like, well, I can do that, but it doesn't work well. And so I've gone away from that and we've gone into this new way of doing things. So instead, anyways, so yesterday, for example, woke up, worked for 3 hours, went on a walk for 45 minutes, filmed a video with Jason, did 5 hours of meetings, then had a 30-minute break, kind of collected myself, then went to a dinner with somebody who's new on the team and their boss. And then today I woke up, I worked and did all of my end of week reporting. So like I go through all the reports for the end of the week.
Reports for the different businesses.
For different businesses and different employees. So all the people that report to me send in reports and then I get reports for businesses. I go through all the reporting and stuff on Fridays in the mornings. And then I came into the office. I did hair and makeup. I took one-on-ones while I did hair and makeup. And so like I'll get my hair and makeup done and have people doing meetings with me. And then I held a team training for my managers. So it was basically on how to spot potential leaders in the company. And do you need to hire or do you need to develop people? Because we're at a point right now where we're growing really fast. And so I'm trying to educate them on what it looks like to expand. And then I went and talked to Alex about a deal that we're mid-doing. And then a fire that I'm trying to put out, and then I came in here.
How do you think the economy's doing? I mean, you have
I'm
a
really
whole
out
bunch
of
of
touch with
businesses. Really?
Yeah, most of our business is doing really well. So it's what I see happening and what I'm experiencing myself are different. And I don't know why that is, but I'll say this. I think a great business can still do well in a bad economy. It makes it harder, but they can still do well. I also think that how you market, how you position your business during the times when the economy is bad, how you price, how you package, if you do all those things well, then you can take advantage of it. And we've done that with a decent amount of our companies. But what I'm seeing in terms of like all the stores closing, all the restaurants closing, all of those things, yeah, it doesn't look great. I'll be honest, like I try not to dive into it too much because like enough that I know what's going on, but not enough that it's consuming all my time and energy, because then it takes me away from doing things that could help.
What are the biggest differences having an office like this?
Wow. Such a change.
How many square feet is this? 10,000, I believe?
40,000.
Oh, this is 40. Why did I think 10,000?
I don't know. It's 3 stories.
Idiot.
Yeah. So you probably saw one. It's been a very large life change. The beginning was weird because it was so different. It's like you drive somewhere now. You know, now I'm not in the same house as Alex. We're like completely separate offices. He's there, here. I don't know what he's doing. You know, we don't see each other as much. We don't go on our walks. Like there's a lot of stuff at first that I was like, whoa, this is weird. And very quickly, as soon as people started coming here, and now we've had a lot of people move here, and now we're hiring a lot of people here and have hired, it's so much better.
Really?
I mean, I think because our culture is really great, and that's like the centerpiece of everything for me is like leadership, culture, developing people. Like the number one thing we offer at acquisition.com is growth. And I can say that very confidently. Like everyone grows so much here because we put such an emphasis on teaching. And so because of that, there's just, it's a positive place to be. I don't feel like I walk in a room and that people are like, oh, I don't want to see Leila. Like actually people try to find me and they want to talk to me, which is a good feeling. And I want to talk to them. And when I run into somebody, I love having a conversation with them about like, how are you going to grow? How are you going to develop? Like, what are we going to do next? What are your goals? Like, I love that stuff. And so it's actually been this sense of community that I don't think I have felt for a long time. And I really now understand why people said, you know, people who had great cultures say that in person is better than remote. Now, here's the thing. I don't require anybody who doesn't need to be here. Like, obviously, if you manage the building and you're the building manager, you have to be in the building. But everybody else, we do not have any hours that you have to be here. We do not have that you have to be here a certain amount of days a week. Nothing. We just said if you want to live in Vegas and come to the office, then do it. And voluntarily, people are here from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's not because I tell them to. It's not because there's some unwritten rule. It's not like if people are at home, we're like, great. Like, nobody judges them. It's literally just because they like being here. You know, we have the whole bottom floor is a gym. You know, a lot of younger people here all working out together, trying to get healthy, trying to put on muscle. Like, people are socializing in their free time. And so because of that, they spend more time here, I think. Yeah. And so I love it. I think at first it was hard to get used to, but now I love having the separation from my house. I had no idea how it would feel. That was actually the biggest one, is like, I want to go home at the end of the day. And it feels like home is separate from work, which I didn't know what that would feel like until it happened. It's like, I don't have the inclination to work when I'm at home anymore. It's like, I have the inclination to like be a wife and Alex be a husband, and we kind of like take our hats off and it changes. And so there's just a lot of benefits that I just was not expecting.
Do you find that people are more creative in person? Because I feel like that's the only thing that, from our experience, is kind of lacking with remote work, is that you don't have that same sort of spark as you do when you're face-to-face with somebody.
Collaboration is much more difficult remotely, I will say, for a lot of, I would say for a decent amount of roles. It's harder to read facial expressions. People don't know how to communicate as well on Zoom calls or on phone calls. And so the ability to read somebody is just a lot more in person. And I think it's a more relaxed. Like when you're on Zoom, it's like this meeting, and it's like, you know, you have to unmute and mute and you're talking over, and it's like, there's a lot of other dynamics you have to manage versus when you're in person, you're like, we got a whiteboard and 2 hours and then a Red Bull, let's go. It's way more fun, you know? And I think that the experience of collaborating, like for example, if we're going to do a day, it's like we might order a bunch of cookies or donuts and like go in the break room and we're like, we're going to whiteboard this out. It's like, yeah, I think it's more fun. And when you're having fun, you're more creative.
To help people understand what acquisition.com is it's essentially like a family office where you guys invest in companies and take stake in them and then provide them with tools and advice and guidance to build up their company, right?
Correct.
If Shark Tank offered you guys a seat, because we just had Kevin O'Leary on, and he loves what he does on Shark Tank, would you go and sit on Shark Tank?
I would need to see the fine print of the deal. because
if it was as assumed, you know?
I don't know what to assume, actually. I've heard different things. So I would say I would be open to it for sure. But I'll tell you, like, we've turned down multiple TV contracts because I don't like, right now, I want to focus on building this, and I don't need Shark Tank to build it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but they could help, right?
They could be a mentor.
They could be a great mentor. Yeah.
There's other ways to get that. And so it's like going on TV, the amount of time it takes, the amount it takes me for my team. I'm not in Vegas for my offices. Like, listen, if you had asked me a year ago, I would have said yes. But I think right now, just like with the season we're in, I would have to be flying back here like every week. I don't know where they do it or any of that kind of crap. But like emotionally, yeah, I would love to do it. That sounds fun. I just don't know if that would be something that would be a smart decision based on
Serving
the
the goal.
season I'm in right now. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, so the last thing that we wanted to discuss here was we had you and Alex on at the same time, and we talked about relationships and stuff like that. One thing that Graham and I were considering is, do you ever feel with like traditional gender roles, the pressure of something like that? Because you, I feel like traditionally speaking, go counter tradition.
Counter tradition in the way that we work together. I wouldn't say counter traditional in the home. Like Alex doesn't touch the house, cleaning, food, none of that. Like I make sure he has water and is fed. I even still bring him snacks. I'll be like on a meeting and bringing him food. Like, and I like doing it. It's not because I feel obligated to. We have people that we can pay, but I still like to if I can. So in a lot of ways, I am actually still pretty traditional, which I think is probably like not what people see. But like, I don't show my like cute wife self on media because like I ain't fucking married to Joe Schmo over here. You know what I mean? So I would say that is the first. Is like I actually do think that we have fairly traditional gender roles when it comes to like how we interact within our marriage, but how we interact as business partners. I think we have a really good business partnership. And I think that we have a lot of respect for one another. And so I would say that I definitely felt the weight of external judgment in the beginning. But we had a lot of conversations about it. You know, I felt like I had to still cook dinner every night the way, like, cause I actually went and did culinary school for a year. I thought that I had to keep cooking dinner from scratch every night, even though I'm the CEO of a company that at the time Gym Launch was doing 50 million a year. And I'm on meetings, literally running a meeting, and I'm like baking these beans over here. Like I was just trying to do everything. I felt that. I felt like people always were judging me, especially when I was around 25, of like, why don't you have kids? Why do you have kids? And I was like, I don't know. I don't want them right now. Like I just was like, I don't know. I don't have a desire. Like what's wrong with me? You know? And so I've definitely felt like there's judgment cast on me for not maybe fitting into the other 50% of the role that I don't. Like I'm not at home with children. I don't have children, like taking care of the house. It's not that I think poorly of any of those things. It's just not something that I've had a desire for. And so I just had to have conversations with Alex about it of like, you know, I'm in my head about this now that, you know, people are starting to ask me and people are saying these things like, what do you think? And, you know, we both agreed on that we didn't want that for ourselves and for our marriage. And if people want to judge us for it, then that's okay.
What does that internal debate look like for you when you're debating whether or not having kids? I remember when we had Alex on, he says he is scared of having kids because he's worried he would hate his kids.
Yeah, I mean, I worry that
he would dislike his kids.
Yeah, I don't think he used the word hate.
No, sorry, he
Just
wouldn't
dislike.
like
He
them.
wouldn't like the person they grew up to be, and he has no
Yes.
control over that.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah,
And
he never
you
said
if-
hate.
He didn't say hate. Yep, he did not say hate. Maybe dislike.
Oh, you're good. For me, it's more, you know, so I'll tell you when I finally realized why I didn't have a desire for kids, because I always pictured myself being a mom. And then as I got further along, we started the business and all this stuff, I was like, I don't even want them. Why don't I want them? And I talked to actually Tony Robbins, and it was in this private, like, little event that he had, and then we got invited to, and a woman he brought up women that don't want to have kids. And he's like, the reason a lot of women have kids is there's a lack of something. They're at a certain age. They don't have a purpose. They haven't figured out something that's fulfilling them. And so they have this lack that they want to fill. And so a lot of women fill it with kids. He's like, Now, a lot of women now have filled that lack with a purpose, with a career, with a mission they're on. He's like, and so those women don't really want to have kids. And I just remember the moment we said it, I was like, that's exactly it. Like, I have people that I mentor. I have people I develop. I have people I feel like I take care of and I think about in my free time. I have a sense of community, or you could say family, within the workplace. And so it feels like in many ways I have created a lot of things that I've wanted, that you would get a lot of those benefits from having children, but I get them from other places. And then I think, it goes into losing freedom and autonomy. I'll go like this, right? So if I had kids and I wanted to keep doing what I'm doing, I would have to have a lot of help. And then I go back to, okay, well, if I'm going to see my kid for 60 minutes a day and they're getting raised by somebody who's not their parent, why am I having kids? And then I go to, okay, well, I could just stop everything and I could just raise them myself. And then I go to like, oh yeah, I would be depressed. Not because of just having kids, but I want to work. And I have this thing that I'm doing and I want to see it out. And so I would say that's probably the main conundrum for me is, who would take care of them? What would that look like? Yes, you can do both, but I would prefer, if I do have kids, like you have to ask yourself at some point, like if you're just gonna have other people take care of them, then why are you having them? To say that you have them, to fulfill a societal, whatever? I don't know. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, and here's the truth. I think I'll be happy either way. Like, I think I'm gonna have a great life, whether I have kids or not. I'm not like scared of having or not having them. I think that's how everything in life works, though.
Could always adopt Jack and me.
Jesus.
You don't take care of us.
That's a good point. Actually, Graham, get out
Feed
that
ourselves.
paperwork over there that we printed for this.
We made this really easy for
I'm
you.
a great mom, but no, I'm kidding. Jesus.
All right. Well,
Really
thank you,
appreciate
Leila, for coming on the podcast. Thank you guys for watching. And until
Thanks.
next time.
And we'll show you the adoption paperwork. It's
Jesus.
no, we're serious, actually. We have it.